In the previous video, we looked at what a sinking fund was and how a company would work out how much they would be paying every month into the sinking fund to replace a machine. And the previous example was a photocopier. Now we're going to extend that photocopy example and look at how a company would use a sinking fund to finance services to old equipment, which is what they sometimes do. Let's just have a recap of the important information from the previous example. The value of the sinking fund was 314,645 Rand and 43 cents. The interest rate was 14.4% per annum compounded monthly, and it was a 5-year period. Now let's see how this question is extended. So the company then decides to use the sinking fund account as a means of financing half-yearly services of 6,000 Rand to the old machine. Now take note, the first service will take place 6 months after the sinking fund was opened, and the last service will take place 6 months before the new machine is bought. In order to have enough money to finance these services, the company will need to increase their monthly premiums into the sinking fund. So if they're taking out 6,000 every 6 months, they're not going to have enough money to replace the machine. So they're going to need to increase those monthly premiums. And that's what we need to calculate, the new increased monthly premiums. Now before you feel overwhelmed, there's too much information, what's going on, just think practically what's happening. Every 6 months you need 6,000 Rand. So that's actually a future value annuity. 6,000 Rand every 6 months. Future value annuity, let's just work with that in its own timeline. Because once we've worked out the future value of all those 6,000s, then we will know how much to add into our sinking fund and then work backwards to get how much we would need to be putting into that sinking fund every month in order to get that new total, that new future value. I'm going to write notes as we go so we can really break this question up. So we are looking first only at our payments of 6,000 Rand every 6 months. So this is its own timeline. But if in doubt, well, actually always draw a timeline. You can visualize it, you can usually work with it. Alright, now we know that it goes from T0 up to T60. And stuff's happening every 6 months. So let's pop in a T6, T12, and a T54, because that's 6 months before the end. But because things are happening every 6 months, actually, T6 becomes kind of like our new T1. And this becomes a T2. Because we'll be working every 6 months. So in which case, T54, that'll be the 9th. T9. And T60 would be T10. Alright, so when are the payments of 6,000 Rand made? We said the first one is made 6 months after opening the sinking fund. And the last one is made 6 months before the end. So there's our last 6,000. Now what we want to calculate is this new future value here. The future value of all those 6,000s. And that we're going to add on eventually to the amount in the sinking fund. But now we've got a bit of a problem because we need to know our interest rate. We need to know what interest rate are we working with. Okay, now we know from our recap here that our interest rate is 14.4% per annum compounded monthly. However, we've got a problem because remember your compounding period has to match your payment period. Now, according to this timeline, payments of 6,000 are made every 6 months, but our interest rate is monthly. So you need to match your interest rate to your payment period. So think back to how we do that. We would need to make a conversion, and how we convert one interest rate to another. We have a formula for converting a nominal to a nominal interest rate. So let's use that. So I'm just going to refer to the interest rate we want as I. You can do I2, you can do I nom, you can name it however you want. Now remember, our formula is 1 plus the interest rate we want divided by the payment period to the power of the payment period is equal to 1 plus the interest rate we have divided by its payment period to the power of the payment period. Now let your calculator do the hard work. You're going to take the square root of that, then subtract 1. And if you do all of that, you end up with I over 2 being equal to 0,074 what something. Please don't round off at this point. You have not finished your question, so you're not allowed to round off. So let's just make a note that you need to store this. Store on calculator. I'm not going all the way to I, because you'll see now when I actually use this in my formula, I'm going to use I over 2 anyway. So I'm just going to stop there. Store it on your calculator, for example, under A. Okay, so you've got it stored. Now you know the interest rate, so let's work out the future value of all of these. Cool, so therefore, if I want to calculate that future value, I've got 6,000. Okay, now just have a look at your timeline. It's not a normal end to end. The end to end actually goes from there to there. It gives you end to end. But then you've got to just take into consideration that extra little bit. So actually, let's just highlight the end to end part. That's a normal end to end timeline. So that's a normal annuity formula. Then it accumulates interest for that last little piece. So don't forget that. Leave it in and let it accumulate interest. Right, so I've got my 6,000. 1 plus now my interest rate, because remember it has to be compounded half yearly, is 0,074 ... That's my I over 2 already. It's the power of 9. You go and count these. 1, 2, all the way up to 9. Minus 1 over 0,074. Please put the ... when you're doing the calculation so that you show your marker you haven't rounded off. Then we let it accumulate interest for one more period. Just one more period. Let your calculator do the hard work for you, and you get 78,559,530 ... Again, don't round off because it's not the end. So again, don't round off yet. Don't round off yet. Usually at the end, it actually makes such a small difference, if any, whether you round it off or not. But it's best just to play it safe, where you don't round off until the very end of a question. Okay, so don't round off. So maybe you can store that as B on your calculator. So let's just make a note of what we've done here, just so that you know when you're using these notes again later. This is the extra amount that must be added to 314,645 Rand and 43 cents to finance services. Okay, so the extra amount covers the financing of the services and it must be added to that amount here. Alright, so now we're getting closer. We know how much needs to be in our account. It's that plus that needs to be in our account. But we now need to see what our new monthly payment's going to be. So let's make notes. We are now looking at the increased monthly premiums. So we are looking now at the increased monthly premiums. Oopsie, let's spell premiums right. Monthly premiums that will allow for our services and still provide enough money to purchase a new machine. So, timeline again. Up at this point, you're starting to feel bored of timelines. That's how well you need to be able to draw them. Okay. So let's have a look at our timelines. Remember, we're going back to monthly. So we've got T0, T1, T2, all the way up to T60. Let's pop in our T59 as well. Now remember, our future value is our previous 314,000 and what, plus that 78,000 and what, gives us 393,204,96 ... So we've added them together, but you see it's a ... because I'm not rounding off. I want to use the unrounded value in my formula. So let's see what our new payments are going to be, what our new X is. Bearing in mind, remember that the first X happens immediately, the first payment, and the last one happens at the end. So there are 61 payments here. Okay, so I've got my 393,204,96. There's only 4, so it's 9608, 4 decimals, equals my new X. 1 plus my interest rate. Remember, that's my monthly interest rate, which we were given in that first example. 61 payments divided by 0,14412. Let your calculator do hard work. What are my new monthly payments going to be? They're going to be 4,408 Rand and 97 cents.